Hi everybody, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial for the Stonefly Nymph. Now I'm not sure about all of you guys, but whenever I hear the word stoneflies, what I picture in my mind are a bunch of adult stoneflies fluttering really close to or laying on the surface, about to lay their eggs, just getting picked off by some enormous trout. Now, that's what I picture, but in reality, that's not always what's happening. In fact, in my experience, it doesn't happen quite that often, for me anyway. However, let's go back a few steps in their life cycle and talk about stonefly nymphs. Now, for most fly fishermen, stonefly nymphs are something they fish late winter, early spring, because that's more than likely when those nymphs are going to be attempting to crawl out of the stream and emerge into those adults before coming back to lay their eggs. But in reality, that's not exactly when trout are more than likely just waiting for them, or we're going to say being a little opportunistic for the stonefly nymphs. Instead, stonefly nymphs are in the water for an extended period of time, and there's always the possibility that they'll be dislodged. Knowing that, trout are always up for picking off one of those stonefly nymphs when they see them coming with the current. So please don't believe that you should just be fishing that in that late winter, early spring. Instead, you should be fishing stonefly nymphs throughout the entire season. By stonefly nymphs, I mean, depending on what's in your area, the brown, the black, and those golden stones. Now, let's just think about a stonefly nymph. In my experience, here's some characteristics of those nymphs that really stand out. For starters, they have a tail that really just seems to be splayed, and it's a little bit longer than in most typical fly patterns that I see out there. Next, they have this body that's almost like a body of armor. It just looks very durable. You make your way up closer to the thorax, that armor really just seems to just take on different pieces up there. And then you have their 6 legs splaying out. Finally, right in front of the head, you have a couple antennae that are shooting straight out. Again, just a little bit longer than you would typically expect. So that's the basic gist of the stonefly nymph. Now it's our job to try to represent something looking pretty similar to that. Now, if you do a Google search, you are going to find out that fly tyers love imitating the natural stonefly nymph. There are so many absolutely incredible patterns out there that are almost beyond belief in terms of realistic. Now, unfortunately, I really can appreciate those. However, I typically don't tie them because it's tough to know that you're going to be fishing a fly on the very bottom of the stream and you have a really high likelihood of snagging and losing that pattern. It's tough for me to justify tying a pattern that might take more than a half an hour and then losing it after less than 5 minutes of fishing. Thus, I'm going to introduce this pattern to you. Now this pattern is kind of a combination of two. For starters, there's a fly tyer by the name of Sanchez. He has a really well-known fly known as the rubber leg Biot Bug. It's a stonefly nymph, and what Scott did, he incorporated a couple of goose biots on the sides of the stonefly nymph to basically represent that body armor and just give that stonefly nymph that stonefly-esque look. Next, about a month ago, I saw a video, and by a month ago, I'm talking sometime in early 2014. This video came out by Curtis Fry of the Frankenfly website. Curtis had his own take on the fly, and he called it the Twitchy Chicken Stonefly Nymph. Now, he had some similar characteristics to Scott's pattern. However, what Curtis did at the front was take some Coq de Leon hackle and wrap that around, giving it that soft hackle look. I really like that. It was a really nice take on the fly. Now what I'm going to do, as a typical fly tyer does, is basically steal a little bit from both. I'm going to stick with Scott's body, and I'm going to also stick with Scott's antenna because I really liked how he also used some biots for the antenna. However, Curtis's take on having that soft hackle is something I really like. In fact, I already have a stonefly on YouTube called TC Stonefly Nymph, and it's one that I incorporated some CDC legs with. I really like the notion of having some legs out there, more so sparse than some I've noticed on Curtis's, and I really think that incorporating those legs can do nothing but absolutely help this pattern. Now, I'm going to kind of do a combination of the two, so I wasn't quite sure what to call this fly. It is definitely not my own. I'm going to call it basically the Biot Stonefly for now, somewhere along that. And if you look in the description, I may have modified it since, but in reality, this is a modified Scott Sanchez rubber leg Biot Bug / Curtis Fry Twitchy Chicken Stonefly Nymph. So with that said, I'm going to show you a picture of the finished fly, list all the materials, then take you step by step through the fly tying procedures for this stonefly nymph. Alright, it's time to start tying this Stonefly Nymph. For starters, I have an Allen fly fishing hook in my vise. This is their N202. It's a hopper and terrestrial hook, but it's got an incredible bend that's perfect for this Stonefly Nymph. I'm tying this in a size 12, though I'll tie this as large as a size 8, the whole way down to a size 16, even occasionally a size 18 for those real small stoneflies. I have a 2.5 millimeter black bead. It's a tungsten bead that I've already placed on the hook. And then I made approximately 10 wraps of some .015 lead wire. Once I get those two on, I'm basically just going to take them and push them to the back. I really want to get those out of the way. Next time I grab a little bit of black A-dot thread, and I'm going to start this really close to the hook eye. And by really close, I mean directly at the hook eye, and leave everything right there. What I'm going to first tie on are the two antennas. And I want to get those as close to the hook eye as possible, and I don't want to create a lot of space behind them because it might be tough to get that bead over them. I'll tie these on one at a time so you can see how I'm putting them on. I'm going to make them so that when they bend, they basically will bend away from the eye. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a second. You're only going to need a few wraps to secure these. And that's what they look like. So they're just both going away from that eye. Once I have those tied in place, I'm going to snip away the tag ends of the biots. Then I want to really just make sure those are as neat as possible. Once I'm sure of that, I can slide my bead forward, and I want to just leave a little bit of room up there so that I can tie in some soft tackle at the very end. So I'm just going to figure out a spot that I like, then I take my thread and just fold it behind the bead, just real gently, and kind of lock it in place right where I want it. Once I have that locked in place, then I slide my lead wire up. If there's a little gap that's been created there, that's okay, because we're going to be tying off some materials there. I'm just going to wrap this the whole way back. I'll go over this body a couple times, but it's not going to be going anywhere. Then I'm going to stop my thread directly above where that barb would be. However, I did debarb this hook so I can get the tungsten bead onto it. All right, at this point, I'm going to be using a little bit of some SLF squirrel spiky dubbing. This color is black. Again, I recommend tying this pattern in black, brown, and a golden stone. Now what I'm going to do with this black dubbing is just create a little bit of a ball near the back so I can ensure that that tail is splayed. Don't be afraid to really go a little bit heavy on this ball because you really want to make sure that that tail is kicking out on both sides. So once I have a nice little ball there, I'm going to then tie in my two tails and make sure that they are facing away. Now in this case, I'm just using some black goose biots. Whenever I cut these two, I want to make sure they're cut as close to that stem as possible because I really need the length of these. If you can find very long biots, go with them. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did at the eye. I want to make sure when they splay out, they splay away from the hook. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I really, whenever I see the naturals, I see them with longer tail sections. So I'm going to keep mine at approximately just a hair, but basically the length from the bead to where I'm tying in. That's the length I want that tail section. I'm going to tie in one on one side and one on the other. I want to make sure that the tails are approximately the same length. If they're off a little bit, that's okay. Now, I'm not going to worry so much about this section up here, these biots. If they go the whole way up and touch that bead, great. If they go past it, that's even better. If they're a little short, that's not going to hurt this fly one way or the other. But what I really am going to make sure about is that they're locked down back here. So I'm going to put a couple extra turns. Next I'm going to grab some ultra wire. This is size brassy. The color is black. I'm going to take that in. I'm actually going to tie it down the top of the fly. I'm just going to lock it in, pushing it basically against that lead wire. So I'm just going to lock in a few, and then I'm going to bend these biots back. Just pull them back, put a couple wraps in front of them, and that's it for now. I'm going to return to my dubbing, take a healthy pinch of dubbing. Now again, going back to the characteristics of those bodies, whenever we see these nymphs, they're not like scuds. They're not real buggy bodies. They're not like those caddis. They're a really slender, I shouldn't say slender, more of a sleek body. So you want to really try to create that nice dubbing noodle. Now, what I like about this SLF spiky scroll is that there's a little bit of flash in it, so you're going to get that out of it. There's some guard hairs, but you're able to really just dub it on nice. You don't have to go too crazy. The only thing I really worry about whenever I dub this is when I get to that lead wire, I want to make sure that it goes over that lead wire smooth and you can't see that transition point. And it looks like I've done that. As I get close, I'm going to add a little more dubbing. Then I'm going to leave a spot right before I tie off. It's about this point, I am pretty good. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So now I just get all this excess stuff out of here. I'm going to take my biots and bend them back forward. I'm going to lock those in place wherever they are. I'm not going to do anything else with that yet. You can see my dubbing starting to sneak up. I'm going to take this wire now and I'm going to create that nice segmented body that I mentioned before. I want to make sure they're even segments. I want to make sure the biots are resting nicely against the sides. When I get this up here to that gap, I'm just going to lock this in with a few wraps. Get the wire out of there. Then I can bring the rest of this dubbing up. Make sure it looks great the whole way around, which it does. Then I'm just going to move my thread forward just a hair. Now I'm ready to grab some soft tackle. Okay, before I grab my soft tackle, I want to mention that this is a point where I've kind of played around a little bit. I've put a little bit of clear cure goo or some other materials, some other UV glues up here. We have issues right now though. If I put them here right now, what will happen is they'll get absorbed into that body for a little bit and you'll have to put multiple coats. Now I've tried to eliminate that by putting a little bit of thin skin up there, then it can rest on that thin skin and not get absorbed, but then you're adding extra materials and really just bulking up the fly. Thus, you're going to notice I'm going to leave this exactly the way it is right now. The only modification I might make is add a couple coats of some clear cure goo or some other type of UV glue, but for the most part I really like how this looks. I still am able to get that nice, almost that armored body from the look of those biots, and I'm just going to leave it be because more than likely that piece is going to be covered by our soft tackle. Speaking of which, I'm going to be using a Clearwater hackle. This is one of their mature hen hackles. Now from this hackle, I have lots of choices to choose from. I typically will use a couple different pieces of this. I love these pieces down here, these feathers that are closer to the neck because they're kind of spread out a little bit and the fibers will definitely move in the water. But whenever it comes to these stoneflies, I like that really dark color. So I'm going to move a little bit higher up and I'm going to grab one of these ones. It almost gives that sheen off of it. I don't want it to be super long, but I still just like that nice black sheen. Now, if you're looking for the proper way to prep this hackle, what I would recommend is take it, grab all this marabou looking stuff, basically the fluffy stuff, and pull that away. Just get that off of this. Leave the stem exposed. I might trim the stem away, the very bottom part. So my hackle looks like this. Then I'm actually going to pinch it by the tips and then pull those down as well. Pull some excess fibers down. Trying to get them as even as possible. So now I have it looking like this. I'm going to tie this feather in right here and then wrap it with the stem. Now the only key is make sure you cut this section of the feather and not your biots. Okay, whenever I wrap this, I might grab my Stoneflies Hackle pliers. A lot of guys have been asking about these. This is their gray. I believe this is their regular size Hackle plier. These are indispensable. I believe there's a couple fly shops where you can get them. Search for them on eBay. Stonefo, S-T-O-N-F-O. It's an Italian-based company. This is my Stonefo Vice. They are really putting out some great materials right now. What I like about it is it holds it. You're not going to lose it. Now with this hackle, this Clearwater hackle that I'm using, this hen, whenever you wrap it, it might splay a little bit. Don't be concerned about that. That's not a bad thing. And I'll show you why here. I'm just going to make 2 turns. No more. That's all I need. I got more than enough going on there. I'm going to lock this in place with just a couple turns of thread. I'm going to release it, and then I'm going to take all this hackle and pull it back. I'm going to leave the biots going forward because those represent our antenna. So just gingerly pull this stuff back. I didn't get it all yet, but I'm just going to try to get in a couple clusters. And there we go. Now I have it all. Just to ensure that, I'm just going to wrap back as close to that bead as possible. My stem is the last thing that's remaining. Pull that closer to the front. Trim that away. And then now I can finish off my head of this stonefly. Here's one. I'll put a second whip finish in here, and I will put a little bit of head cement on this to keep everything locked in place. And there is my finished Stonefly Nymph. I'm just going to prep these legs just a little bit, separate them, just so you can get the full effect of what I was talking about. Now what's nice about this pattern right here is that we have those main characteristics that we're looking for in this stonefly. When I talked about this stonefly at the beginning, I talked about that body armor, and we got that body armor with this biot. You can see it really just takes on some great characteristic in there. We have that nice tail. We got a great splay going on because of our dubbing ball. We have that ribbing that's pronounced with that black ultra wire. That brassy size really brings it out. This bead in here helps to kind of give a little bit of pronunciation to our thorax, and it also helps to splay these fibers out. These fibers, we're going for more of in the round fibers that no matter which way that fish looks at this head, it's going to see some fibers. Now, is it more than 6 legs? Absolutely. But that's not a bad thing because of the way that the fish could be looking at it. We want to make sure there are some pronounced legs there. And then finally, by keeping a little bit of gap in between those legs and our hook eye, it really allows for that antenna to just kind of be shown off. And you can really just picture that little stonefly head right in between that. So with that said, this is a finished look at the, gosh, like I said, I'm not sure of what the name's going to be, but something along the lines of the Scott Sanchez / Curtis Fry Stonefly Nymph variation. Thanks go out to Allen Fly Fishing for the use of their N202 hook. You can check that hook out and many more at allenflyfishing.com. And more importantly, thanks go out to all of you for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or as always, you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Good luck tying and fishing this Stonefly Nymph, everybody.